Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The wait is finally over. We have Cavs playoff basketball. Still a little bit of a wait because it's the play-in week, but the regular season has come to a conclusion, and the Cleveland Cavaliers will face off against the Toronto Raptors in the first round. Joining me today is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay. A real panic set into the Rodriguez household as we saw my ceiling was sopping wet due to a leak, but plumber has come and gone. And we have resolved the issue, but I'm still coming down from a stressful early evening. So you'll have to forgive me.
Poop happens, my friend. Poop happens indeed. You know what? I'm happy to at least hear that it's been resolved, but that is absolutely a stressful situation. It can be a stressful situation when you're sitting there waiting to figure out who you're going to play in the playoffs. It took a unique combination of events on Sunday for the Cavs to play anyone but the Atlanta Hawks, and that's what ended up happening. I gotta admit, Carter, I had a lot of my playoff prep in my mind and what I was thinking about, things we were going to discuss on this podcast, were geared towards the unique challenge of playing the Atlanta Hawks. We got to play them twice, right? You got to kind of get a feeling out process of,
and we haven't played the Toronto Raptors since like November.
Yeah, it's been a really, really damn long time. And one could probably argue we haven't played the Toronto Raptors this season when you look at the lineups that the Cavs rolled out there in those games. But, I had to kind of recalibrate my thoughts and get back to this mentality of, hey, Cavs and Raptors, I think we're destined to do this for the rest of the time, my friend.
I think it's good for you to knock this out of the way early on. Get yourself worked into a lather. Start really finding your connection to these lads in a postseason setting. This new look Cavaliers team, the first Cavalier to get into a shoving match with a Raptor will be etched into your heart forever. Because this isn't a
jersey purchase without a doubt.
Yeah, there are series where you fall in love with your team, and then there are series you hate the other team so much that you can't help but get invested. And this is clearly one of the latter ones for you. It has nothing to do with how much you love the Cavs. It's just, we got Toronto. I know I'm going to get at least one message from you complaining about your dad texting about the officials at some point. It's going to be great.
Well, the worst part is that I'm going to be stuck with the Raptors broadcast in the first round, and that is about as objective as North Korean news. So I'm fully expecting to be annoyed by some of those things. But the funny thing is, from a roster standpoint, there's not a lot of guys on that Raptors team that I don't like. This is purely a front of the jersey hate at this point.
After a physical series, you'll feel otherwise. That's one of my favorite things about the playoffs, is coming out of each series with a guy that I just want to fist fight in public.
I had no idea I was going to hate Mo Wagner.
How about Ben Mathurin? Did you know you were going to hate Ben Mathurin?
That was actually a really surprising one, particularly someone that I was rooting for just out of pure Canadian bias. To end up hating him was a very, very unpleasant surprise. But, the regular season coming to a close to me is, I've talked about this in the past, the way that I compartmentalize both the regular season and the playoffs. And to me, the regular season holds a special place in my heart. Because for the worst time of the year, from a weather standpoint, when I went from grass on the ground to grass on the ground with a frozen hellscape in between. But during that time, 3 to 4 nights out of every single week, I get to live and die with what this team is doing. I get to enjoy Cavs basketball. I get to think about what's going on. And to me, it's a completely separate entity. You can get indicators from the regular season that can maybe give you some hints of what's going to happen in the postseason. I think that there's things that you can extract value from, but at the end of the day, they really are two separate seasons. And I think, a fresh start is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to see what this team can do after a break. And in a lot of ways, it's a fresh start because we went through 82 games and we have not seen the Cavs' full healthy lineup. And it does seem like, from an availability standpoint, they're actually going to have everybody available for game one of the postseason.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, you called it out. Pretty nuts that the Cavs didn't have a 5-man lineup that played 100 minutes this year. Their leading 5-man lineup was hit 89 total minutes, and that lineup featured Darius Garland and DeAndre Hunter. So, sorry, blew a tire there. But yeah, I mean, it's time. Take over. I'm dying.
Yeah. Poor Carter blew a tire there. But what I was thinking about with this, right, is, really looking back at it when, going all the way back to LeBron departing from this team and us saying that we just want to see relevance. We have 5 years in a row now that we have had winning seasons from the Cavs in the regular season. Like, that is not an insignificant thing. And 2 of those seasons, we have had horrific. Actually, you could probably argue 3, because of that year that the Cavs fell from the 3 seed at the All-Star break to the play-in. They had horrific injury luck. But in this Mitchell era, we've had 2 years where the Cavs have battled so much adversity. And in those years, we won 49 games and 52 games this season. That is not an insignificant thing, though. The Washington Wizards haven't won 40 games in like 40 or 50 games in 40 years. Like, winning 50 is a major, major milestone. And I think it just makes me reflect on how fortunate we are to get these opportunities to have winning basketball. And I think it's one of the worst traits that we have as people, where we adjust to new norms in life far too easily, right? Like, if I think of myself coming out of college, single, not really having a job and stuff like that, just getting a relationship and a career would be like, oh, if I get that, I'm going to be happy for the rest of my life.
I used to say that financial security for me would be being able to go to Chipotle without checking my bank account first.
Right. And you're like, if I can accomplish this, I'm going to be living stress-free. Everything else is fine.
Easy.
Now, married, career, house, all of that stuff. And the stresses of today weigh on me just the same as the stresses yesterday, right? Like, and I think the same thing you can be guilty of as a sports fan, where even though the Cavs have just won one championship in our lifetimes, it's very easy to kind of fall into that spoiled mentality. And it was just something I was reflecting on when I was thinking about us going to the postseason, having another chance to make a deep postseason run of, man, these really are, it's just been such a shift in the status of this team and the amount of stability to weather these storms and still produce 50-win seasons. I just, before we get to the hectic sprint of the postseason, it's just something that I was kind of reflecting on.
Yeah, well, I will say, I think it's weird because you want to hold 2 truths. Truth 1 is exactly what you said. Truth 2 was that it was a hard year.
Really hard year.
Especially coming off all the fun and the joy of a 64-win season where coach can't make a mistake with a rotation, and all 4 of your players, like, think about how hard it was just to get Evan to, all NBA and all defense eligibility. Yeah. He was one of our healthier stars, and one of our healthier players this year. You went from having everyone like play, 65 plus games to, what we had. And it wasn't an easy season. It wasn't always a fun season. The team changed its identity mid-season because of that, I think, in some small part. And so while it's true that we should appreciate the fun, and I always try to remind myself, I do want to acknowledge it wasn't easy. And
absolutely.
And there were times where we're like, oh man, like, we're kind of having the same podcast again. Effort or focus or health, and it kind of felt like we were hitting the same things over and over and over again. But a big reason we talk about the regular season is because we care about habits. We do care about setting standards for yourself that you can kind of lean on under duress in the postseason and all that stuff. But the big reason I care about seeding is I worry about the path. I want to have the best path possible to the playoffs. And Justin, short of the Cavs winning another 64 games and being a 1 seed, it does feel like the road is there for them. And I was even thinking about, like, despite my having real questions about this team's ability to guard at the highest level, and not having seen them just get the reps together. When I think about all the matchups that they might have, there's really only a couple that jump out at me and go, I would be really afraid in a series against them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I say that, I mean crossing beyond the threshold of respect for a really good team.
Right.
Like the Boston Celtics are a team I would be really, really, even if the Cavs were in good form heading into a series against them, I'd wonder about whether the Cavs could do it. OKC, same thing. But when you look at the Knicks, the Pistons, the Spurs, the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Rockets, like all these teams, I've seen the Cavs play really, really well against those rosters, and
Yeah.
I feel like we've gotten some breaks, some bad breaks, I would say, in the form of drawing some of the hardest matchups for what we do and what we aren't, and more importantly, what this team doesn't do in the past. And like, maybe it has lined up in such a way that, like, if this team is ready to grab the bull by the horns, if this team can stay healthy, maybe they can make the run that we've been waiting on for the last couple of years.
I completely agree. Right. When we talked about this a couple weeks ago, when we were saying who would we like to see the Cavs play in the first round, I think the only team we had above Toronto was the Miami Heat, who might not make the postseason, right? Like, if you look at that play-in mix, there's some really hot teams in there, right? Like the Charlotte Hornets have been playing great basketball for a while. I think Orlando is better than the record with the injuries that they've had. And not to say that, the Toronto Raptors aren't capable of challenging the Cavs. I think they are absolutely capable of challenging the Cavs. But from a matchup standpoint, in a time in the NBA where I think matchups matter more than ever, right? Like, all these teams are deep, all these teams have great top end talent. I think the baseline for coaching in the NBA is as high as it's ever been. In a time where matchups matter more than ever, I think that this side of the bracket and getting to play Toronto and then the winner of Detroit and the 8th seed, which I would assume to be Detroit, I think that these are the most advantageous matchups, or at least the easiest from a stylistic standpoint that the Cavs could have.
Yeah,
And I think,
and even on the other side of that East bracket, the Celtics have one of the hardest matchups they could have in the second
yeah,
round, and a Knicks team that beat them last year and beat them quite handily.
yeah. And I think that this is significant because, well, first of all, we're going into the playoffs where game one is going to be the first game that we've had with the healthy rotation, right? Like, that is going to require some adjustment no matter what is happening here. But this is also just a group that hasn't had a ton of time together to begin with, right? And I think that there is going to be some figuring things out. I think there are going to be times where mistakes get made. And if you're in a situation where, from a matchup standpoint, you're not being pushed really far out of your comfort zone, I think it gives you more margin for error to work through some of those issues. And the playoffs start on Saturday, but a potential Eastern Conference Finals, which I think is the goal for the Cavs at the bare minimum to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. At the bare minimum, Carter, don't you point up. That starts a month later. You're going to have an opportunity to work on some stuff, to challenge yourself against these good teams. I think you're capable of losing, right? Like, I don't want to act like this is just some foregone conclusion that they're going to make it that far, particularly in the second round. But I think that this is as advantageous of a scenario and a path for the Cavs as humanly possible. Like, I think this is the path that gives them the highest likelihood to reach their form by the time that they need to reach that form.
Yeah, which was kind of my take all along, So thank you. Thank you for finally joining the dark side now that it's our reality, which is like, I just want this team to have as much time as possible because they haven't had the chance to form the habits. They haven't had the chance to really test themselves. They haven't really been had enough meaningful games under duress to really find out who they are. And like, I was listening to Stephen Nikias kind of do their preview of the Cavs on their East preview, and they were just kind of talking about like the challenge that Kenny's gonna have in this postseason of like, do you tinker because you need to play different lineups and try different combinations, and are you tinkering from any kind of place of confidence? Like, you kind of want to know roughly how a lineup performs before you put it out in a high leverage moment, and like Kenny's just not going to get to do that.
Yeah.
There will be some that are just like straight up by function. The core four have played 92 total minutes together. Again, plus 26.7 net rating in those 92 minutes. So that's great. And, I'll bet they double that if this postseason goes where we want it to. So some of this stuff will play itself naturally, but there will be a time where he throws out a lineup that we have seen play less than 30 minutes over the course of the season to start a fourth quarter, to buy some time, to try to stymie a run. And it does, if there's anything that gives me pause outside of just, seeing this team find their road to habits, it is the fact that Kenny is going to inherently be coaching blind to some extent.
Yeah, and I think Kenny deserves a lot of flowers, right? Like when we talk about pulling off 52 wins despite the complete lack of continuity all season, you have to give the coaching staff credit in that situation, right? And I think what he's going to be asked to do in this postseason is a very, very difficult task. And I think that's where it shifts to, the leadership and responsibility on the court as well, right? Like I think the level of communication that's going to be required from both James and Donovan is going to be insanely important, because you're going to be working with guys that in combinations that you haven't spent a lot of time with. Kenny's going to be asking you guys to go out there and do stuff in groups that you haven't spent a lot of time with in general. So the communication has to be that much more sharp, and I think it needs to be that much more frequent, right? And that's not just on the court. It's in the film sessions, it's in practice, it's in shoot around. You need to be communicating consistently to help try to smooth some of this out and mitigate the bumps along the road. And I think that comes from a leadership standpoint, right? Because in today's NBA, and we know with the Cavs, what you run offensively, a lot of it is read and react, right? Like everyone knows what the sets are going to be, but you are trusting the decision making of your decision makers out there, right? And the guards are going to be those primary guys. And communication is just as important, if not more, on the defensive end as well. So I think that it really, really starts with those guys, because Kenny, like, he's going to be put in uncomfortable positions. He's going to have to try to throw some things together and make it stick. Last year, basically every combination worked. And I think some of that was the familiarity. And I think some of that was, just the confidence that those guys had in one another. You need to replicate that, even if it's faking it if you make it, right? Like I've said it a million times, but a less than ideal play executed at 100% is going to be more effective than the perfect play executed at 80%, whether that is tempo, whether that's buy-in, engagement, whatever you want to call it. Just go out there, communicate, and run it confidently.
Yeah, listening to you talk about that kind of throwing that gauntlet down on the backcourt does kind of make me just feel like it feels like more than ever. I feel like our success or failure is incumbent on our backcourt. And I don't know if I always have felt that way. I feel like in prior playoffs, I'd be like, hey, Evan or Jarrett, we need you to step up. We need you to be able to switch. We need you to be able to demand the ball and all this stuff. And I do feel like even on the offensive end, I think what those two do will determine how this playoff goes, because especially with Evans kind of late, back half of the season transformation offensively. Like there is going to be a reliance on from the bigs for the guards to get them the ball, and the guards are
Yeah.
going to have to involve them. They're going to have to play sharp, focused, belief led basketball that doesn't and not default to what's easy and comfortable, which is going to be isolation and step backs and trying to cook against a set defense. Like they're going to need to keep them involved, if not just to maintain their legs on the other end of the floor, where they are going to set the floor for this Cavs defense.
Yeah.
Evan and Jarrett might set the ceiling, but they're going to set the floor by how attentive they are. Like, how hard is James going to fight through a screen or, to your point, communicate a switch at the point of attack? And then is Donovan going to be sharp enough off ball to navigate a pin down for the guy he's guarding? And are they going to be sharp, focused, attentive, and communicative through that? Because if those two are guarding at a 70th percentile level, then this team can win the title.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think the bar is crazy high for them defensively to have to clear, for this defense to get really, really good. But if they're falling asleep off ball, if they're having a hard time sticking to their man, and if an opposing guard is just getting into the teeth of what the Cavs are doing, well, then that'll really change the math really quick and put so much pressure on the offense. So I just, we haven't seen this team be a great defensive team, and I do really want to throw down the gauntlet, and like two great guys to throw the gauntlet down to in terms of James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, who should be able to meet the moment. And that's a big reason why I think this team has a great shot to make it all the way to the finals.
And two guys that we have seen when they are bought in can have an impact on defense, right?
Yep.
Like neither of them are going to be great defenders. We know that, but they can have an impact. I'm torn because I think there's two thoughts running through my head when I was listening to you there. One, I think you're right. I think from a not only from a leadership standpoint, but just these are the vets, these are the guys that have accomplished the most in the NBA, and you need to lean on that type of experience when it comes to the postseason. So I think what you're saying is inherently true. The other thought in my head is that Evan Mobley does still need to be very involved, and he needs to be very productive. And I think every conversation about how the Cavs could win with a small backcourt is still true with this group, because what often gets lost in the small backcourt conversation is how many teams have won with their two guards being their best players, right? Like it is just as infrequent as the small backcourt conversation in general. And I think sometimes the small backcourt conversation was just a way of saying, who wins with a point guard and shooting guard as your two best players or two most impactful players. I think Evan needs to be that level of impactful, because when teams like that win, they need to have a front court release valve. We've said it year after year. You could point to the Golden State Warriors. They had Draymond Green, right? Like the Raptors had Marc Gasol and Kawhi Leonard. You need to have someone that is stepping up in that way. But the unique thing about a big, and Evan's a big, right? Like he's not a power forward. Like from a skill set standpoint, he's a center that's a little more suited to playing at the power forward position, right? Like that's what he is. He's not a wing that is flexing up to power forward.
No.
You need to have the guards feed them. And I think that is consistently been one of the things that we have wanted to see. I think we have seen it pop up against some of the better teams that we've played, even since the All-Star break, where, hey,
how did that Atlanta game end? It was the guards ISOing. We scored 18 points.
Right. Even in games where it's working well, we sometimes see those bigs get neglected, and bigs can't feed themselves. So it is incumbent on the guards, right? As much as you need Evan to be productive, we need to make sure that the touches are being fed, because then you can actually accurately analyze it, right? Like if he is consistently getting those touches and is turning down looks or isn't productive with it, or, the same thing happens to
freezing
Jarrett,
up the offense.
You can have a conversation around that. If you go through a postseason where, hey, Evan wasn't really productive in games 5 and 7 of this series, but he didn't really get any touches. And look, he was flaring open, his hands were up, and he's not getting the ball. Then when you're having those hard conversations in the postseason, yeah, you can make one of the bigs the scapegoat, but are you addressing the root of the problem there, right? So I think the responsibility comes down to both of those guards, and I think part of the decision making process of bringing in James Harden is, even though we have had these instances where there's been some passivity and the bigs haven't been as involved, historically this is a guy that does consistently feed the bigs. So I think that is one of the kind of the true X factors of the Cavs this postseason from a process standpoint.
Yeah, and that's it is it's a weird year, and it's a weird postseason where it is just really hard to figure out exactly what you can count on, and that's why that's why I kind of lean towards asking the two, the veteran star guards that this team is in a lot of ways built around. Hey, organize us, lead us, get us to where we're going, because I think they really need them, especially without like they have changed their roster a little bit. Like they don't have a DeAndre Hunter who's just going to go hunt shots, if things bog down. Like they're going to have to get teams in rotation consistently. That's primarily going to start with the backcourt. That doesn't mean you can't mix other stuff in, and I still have a lot of big questions and about who earns the wing minutes, what wing minutes what kind of productivity they get from these kind of swing players like Dean Wade. Really is the difference between this, in a lot of ways, between this team looking unstoppable and looking pretty good. If he's hitting his threes and switching and making this team just gargantuan for some of these runs. I also am interested to see. I know I'm getting a little scrambled here, but I'm interested to see where the minutes loads go.
Mm.
If the Cavs are struggling a little bit to find lineups they trust, do you lean on your starters for instead of 14, 15 minutes a game, you lean on them for 22, 23, and then you just are only having to, piecemeal in, just a little bit less. And you play that lineup that you're the least confident in, maybe 2 minutes instead of 7 minutes. Like, I do wonder if Kenny will do that, which is not historically the way he likes to coach. He likes to play 10 guys, run a deep rotation, run a really consistent rotation. I wonder if he just says, hey, guys, longer shifts, saddle up, use the first round to get used to it.
Yeah, I think it's important to lean on things that you feel the most confident in stressful situations. And that's why I really appreciate Zoom Workplace, because teams move fastest when everyone's in sync. Zoom Workplace keeps meetings, chats, documents, and more together, so your work flows like a perfect play. Keep work moving and zoom ahead with Zoom Workplace. I'm very, very curious to see what Kenny does with the rotation. I know he's talked about cutting it down to 9. If I had to guess, I think from a functional standpoint, I think we're going to see 10 players play, but 9 kind of cross that 10, 12-minute threshold. I think that's probably where this is going. If I had to guess who the top 9 in minutes is going to be, I think it's obviously the starting 5, which I think right now the safe assumption is Dean Wade is going to be
great matchup for Dean. We'll talk about that as we get into the Raptors preview, later on in the week. But great,
perfect matchup for Dean against Brandon Ingram. I think that is fit like a glove. After that, I think it's going to be Max, Sam, Jalen, and Keon as the 6 through 9. And I think Dennis is going to play minutes. I think he's going to get between kind of 8 to 12 minutes if I had to guess. And the swing is going to be basically between Jalen, Keon, and Dennis of how that flows. I think Max and Sam are functionally going to be the 6 and 7. And those 3 are kind of the flux point based on matchups or who's playing the best.
So that's what you're expecting. Would you play 10 right off the rip?
I think I would.
Because I know my answer.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes, I would play 10. And part of that is informed by playing the Toronto Raptors. And this is meant as a little bit of disrespect, but I do think that you have the opportunity to kind of play through things. And I think that there's a chance that you might need Dennis at some point. So you want to keep him involved. You want to keep him happy. You want to have him at least a little bit in the rotation. And I think you can go deeper in the rotation versus Toronto to figure out some things, right? This gets back to what we talked about, how the Cavs haven't had their full rotation. If there's a series where you can experiment a little bit with it, I think you can get away with that in this matchup without getting burnt too badly. And Toronto's a team that allows a high frequency of rim attacks, and they're not particularly good at defending the rim. That is very advantageous to the Cavs' strengths. And in particular, it's advantageous for Dennis Schroeder. So if there was a matchup where he could have some success, I think this would be it. And I think that's part of why I would go 10 deep.
I think if I'm like thinking about this playoffs almost like a pitcher, I want the Cavs to come out of the first round with 2 great pitches instead
Okay.
of 4 or 5 good ones. And that's why I would go with 9. And my plan would be 9, and Dennis would be in that break glass in case of emergency. In the second half, I didn't like the minutes I was getting, or we need a spark. I might deviate from the plan. Like, I don't like the idea of ever saying that, with a player as talented as and helpful as Dennis has been in his career, just be like, no matter what, you're not getting up. I'm riding with these 9. I don't think that's a smart thing to do in a postseason setting where the samples are so small. But like, I just want to dedicate as much time to lineups that I think would help me win the NBA Finals. And when things pare down, because I feel like I would probably go a different direction if we had more 5-man units that had played a lot of minutes and we had a lot of reps. I got to figure out what my fastball is and what my changeup is. And I'll worry about adding a knuckleball later. I mean, that's probably a little too wacky of a pitch for Dennis. Maybe it's a splitter. I don't know. Point is, I want to get the first 2 pitches really, really, really dialed in this first series, because I don't think that they're going to beat Detroit playing B or B- basketball. While I don't think that that's a great matchup for Detroit against the Cavs, I think we match up very well with them.
You got to get to like a B+,
A- at minimum. And you might lose one or 2 of those games. This is a team that's won 60 games. They're tough. They're hard to beat.
You could lose the series playing B+, A- basketball, yes. But I think you have to get to that level to win the series for sure.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm trying to find is, as much as possible, I'm using that first round as a jumping off point to, I'm tinkering in a different way. It's like, it almost sounds like I'm playing the short game, but I'm actually, in my mind, playing the long game by going with 9, because I just need I need to know what my best stuff is.
Well, what I like about this is we are both advocating for playing the long game, right?
Just like completely differently.
Just in completely different ways. And I think what Kenny's going to do, if I had to guess, is very similar to the Atlanta game where Dennis didn't play in the first and third quarter. He plays them in the second quarter to kind of get a feel. And then based on how that goes, he'll determine whether or not he sees minutes the rest of the game. I think if you're going to do it that way, if you're going to go 10 deep, that's the way to do it. And then the real question is going to be, how healthy is Max? How healthy is Jalen? Obviously, seeing Jalen return to the lineup was a big thrill. Like, I thought he looked pretty good. There was times versus Atlanta where I'm like, does he have the same burst? Was that a little bit of a hitch on the shot? Is he trying to find his rhythm? But I thought he was moving really, really well in that season finale versus Washington. I think, and that's a great sign, right? Like when you come back from the toe injury, that hey, it doesn't look like you're grimacing and moving around gingerly out there. It looks like the coaching staff and the training staff got him to the point where he needs to be. And obviously, you have this full week as well to prepare. So I think Jalen is very, very important to what the Cavs. Or I think the best way to say this is if the Cavs are going to accomplish their largest goals for this postseason, Jalen Tyson needs to be a big part of that because he brings something almost no one else does.
Absolutely. Willa Gray in the YouTube chat asked who's the backup PG. I'm presuming in response to the idea of not having Schroeder in that 9-man rotation.
Yeah,
And
I'm just staggering the hell out of Donna and James, and
yeah,
I'm letting them run point.
the real
And
answer is like I think basically, I always like thinking about kind of making coaching decisions from a place of strength. And like I think that you almost want to say like, hey, if a lineup of Donovan, Keon, Max, Dean, and Evan doesn't have enough playmaking, I think you probably have some bigger questions to answer.
I think you got really close. I think you got really, really close
Maybe
to what
Sam
they should
instead
do.
of Keon.
Nope. Nope. What you need to do there, and going back to when DG played his last game for the Cavs, and after that stretch, Jalen Tyson had his best stretch of the season. He was functionally, filling in a higher usage, getting some ball handling reps type role. I think what I'm doing is I'm rolling Don out there. Jalen is functionally playing shooting guard on offense and small forward on defense with Keon and with Max. That is your smaller
Max
line.
at the 4.
Max at the 4, and he and Jalen can kind of body guys up as kind of the smaller ball fours because you need to go to one of those lineups at some point, right? Where Max or Jalen is
and
playing
there's
at
so
the 4.
much supplementary playmaking on the floor there.
And I feel better about going to that non-Dean with a big staggered lineup if both Max and Jalen are out there and you get that extra playmaking and Keon can spot up. I think that is probably the most balanced lineup that you can run out there if you're not going to have a traditional point guard.
And there's enough nastiness out there to deal with the size disparity.
So I think that's what I would do because I think some of Jalen's struggles post-trade have been not getting as many touches. I think he's a guy that does need touches. He needs to feel the ball in his hand to get comfortable versus someone like Max or Sam who they can go 15, 20 minutes without touching the basketball. And as soon as it hits their fingers, they feel great about their shot. I think Jalen is someone that needs some of those touches. So I think that's how I would stagger things if I'm not playing a backup point guard.
Yeah, that's fair. And what that also does for you a little bit is, while Max obviously is going to be playing some minutes of the power forward, I do think keeping Sam with James does a lot. Because that just is pretty unfair when you have a shooter at that level paired with a passer at that level and a pick and roll creator at that level. The other role player combo that I'm just really fascinated to keep an eye on is the Strus Merrill pairing. They have been phenomenal in their 93 minutes on the floor together this year. They've got a 128 team offensive rating, just blowing the doors off of the opposition. By the way, not a very good pairing. They were net negative last year in last year's regular season. But I think they've kind of found something with each other, especially with Sam's increased playmaking skills. So as much as like I think Tyson Max is probably the combo to pair with Donovan when he doesn't have a point guard on the floor. I think Sam Max is the combo to pair with James.
Right, and you could maybe have Max being the bridge guy in the rotation between those two staggered lineups, right? Like that's something that you could very easily do. Maybe he's not even the first sub in, but he comes midway through that first staggered group with James, and then kind of helps the transition over to the next one. Because if you have James out there with Sam, Max, Dean, and Jarrett, like that's perfect spotting up that you can kind of leverage their off-ball movement. That gives James a lot of targets to find. I feel really, really good about that.
Yeah, man, it's fun talking about this stuff. I feel like we've been I'm in the muck of trying to get through the regular season and just hoping we're healthy. And that is one thing just to keep an eye on. Just because they've got a week off doesn't mean Jared Snee is going to magically be better, and or that it might be, but we just don't know. And same with Jalen's toe, even though I thought he looked pretty good. Same with Dean's ankle that obviously flared up.
We know all of that stuff can flare up even if it's feeling great going in.
Yep. So, but it does feel nice to actually be talking about actual hoops, and it feels like um the road is there, and the health seems to finally be there. Now it's just going to be a matter of like, can you put it all together and stack, these reps in about the highest leverage situation you can on. And by the way, how dare they start us on an afternoon weekend game after all our trauma over the course of the
That's
year with these guys getting just blown off the floor on these midday weekend games. That's how we start the postseason, Justin.
I mean, that was a guarantee as soon as we drew Toronto. Like
Yeah.
it was probably going to happen because we were the 4-5 to begin with, but Toronto in particular, that you're getting stuck
There
with
are
that
sexier
matchup.
matchups out there, and I understand that.
There's sexier matchups out there, and from a rating standpoint, TV networks don't get to count any Canadian viewers when it comes to this stuff. So that's always going to hurt and deprioritize Toronto for these spotlight games. So our real rivalry, it's not versus Toronto, it's versus then 1 p.m. start time.
Ugh.
So I think if the Cavs come out and they get a confident, decisive win in game one in that scenario, woo, baby,
Start playing in the parade route, baby.
yeah, no, then we have overcome all demons, and we can feel really great about that. Obviously, we will be getting in depth, talking about the matchup versus Toronto a little later in this week. I'm very excited for our guest that we have for that podcast. But Carter, I do want to talk about realistic expectations going into this postseason. I've seen the conversations about who has the most pressure for the Cavs and stuff like that going into the playoffs, which is silly to me. It's always on the stars, right? Like I think it's Donovan, Donovan and James, because James is at that point in his career, and Donovan's trying to get over the hump. I think it's always going to be on those guys. Do you disagree, or it seems self-explanatory to me? It just feels like talking to talk when I hear it.
Yeah, I think you throw the gauntlet down at the guys who have the most to prove, and those are the guys that have the most to prove. I mean, we already kind of tackled it to some extent, and I do think it's probably worth asking just that question regarding expectations for this team, because like I think if you are a member of the Cavs organization, whether you're a front office member, a staffer, a player, certainly not a podcaster, because we're an exception to this rule, I would say. But if
We're
you
not members of the organization, we're independent contractors, baby.
1099, take care of your taxes, gang. Tax day is coming up. Take care of your taxes. But if you're a member of the organization, I think it's absolutely we have to make the finals. We've gotten older. We have the talent. We have the road. We've now got the health. It's time to go put it together. I think with that 1 degree of separation, I think it's probably conference finals or bust. Just because I just think there's so many mitigating factors. I don't like doing that because I at the beginning of the year would have said finals or bust with where this team was, but I just think. But I don't know. I'm gonna do some bad
Good God,
podcasting.
you're not only sitting on the fence, you are wobbling back and forth.
Well, I'm not even sitting on the fence as much as I'm struggling to decide how I feel about this.
You're trying to see, do you want to go further with it, the take here?
Well, it's not about going further, but like my question to you is, so a big reason why I'm not willing to say finals or bust is because of all this mitigating stuff, the reps together, the health or whatever it may be. If they make it to the conference finals, doesn't that mean they probably exercised enough of those demons to say, let's just go ahead and get to the finals now? Like, it just doesn't feel like that big of a leap. Like, if you beat a 60-win Pistons team in the second round, are we really going to be like, well, Boston's been kind of a tough matchup for them? Like, no, I think our expectations are probably going to be like, let's go get to the finals, and if we don't, that's a disappointment.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think how you play in the conference finals, if you make it there, matters so much. I don't think at this point of the Cavs kind of, character arc of their story, right? The story of this group and their time together. I don't think you can be outclassed in a series, right? Like I think you are a legitimate contender and you need to look that way in every single series. If you have a conference finals run where, let's say, Toronto is as advantageous of a matchup as you expect, and you play Detroit, and Cade hasn't really, he hasn't recovered from the collapsed lung 100%. You can tell he's kind of laboring out there. He's not moving very well. And this team that doesn't have any shooting doesn't look good in the playoffs, which is a tale as old as time. Like, I think if you have an Atlanta Hawks type run to the conference finals, that alone, I'm not sitting here and saying that's 100% progress, right? I think how this stuff happens matters more. If Cade's himself in Detroit is playing great in the playoffs and you go out there and you beat them, I think that is like a legitimate accomplishment. I think you can feel really good about that. But in order for me to feel like this season is a success, how they go out matters so much, right? Like I want to see this
and
team.
that's a fine line to tread, because no one generally looks very good when they're losing.
But you got to go down swinging, man, right? Like I know it's a subjective thing, and it's something that would never generate a consensus, right? Like I think if we saw a very hard fought 6-7 game series against Boston, and let's say it came down to the wire and lost, there are people who are going to run with all their preconceived notions of the Cavs. I think that is an inevitability. But from my standpoint, that what matters to me, and like from an analysis standpoint, that is very different than what happened 2 years ago versus Boston, or that last game against the Knicks. Remember how bad that felt, where it really looked like they checked out? I felt a little bit better coming out of that Indy series because I saw Donovan on one leg and Darius on one leg going down swinging, right? Like we wanted to see Evan be involved more than he was in that last game, but it felt like they were leaving absolutely everything out there on the floor. And I will always appreciate them for that, particularly when you see, Donovan took time to recover. Darius obviously needed surgery and wasn't right all of this season. Like that type of stuff matters to me when you see them leave it all out on the floor. I need to see you be competitive in every one of these series and leave it out all on the floor, right? Because I think that gets to the character piece of this that determines our affinity for this group.
Yeah, well, you're riding kind of a fine line here. But we're also asking the Cavs to ride a fine line. So let's ride the lightning together. And really try to throw out as many of our preconceived notions as we can, and just really evaluate this team for what they are. And I think we have a real chance for a great postseason. I'm feeling really energized by it. It's been such a long season, and when you have these kind of long seasons, that I think Danny Cunningham joked that the 82 game preseason is over. Like it kind of does feel like that in a year like this, and so I'm proud of the team for their resilience over the course. I think it is, to your point, like 52 wins and what was about as big of a nightmare season as possible. Is nothing to sneeze at, and let's see if this team is every bit as talented as we thought they were coming into the season.
It's a brand new, fresh start, man. Like that's what it really, really comes down to here. Just from a historical standpoint, though, when the Cavs make the finals, usually they're going through Toronto, they're going through Boston, and they go through Detroit. And I think, wasn't that the 3 teams we beat in 2016 when we won?
Don't make me remember things right now.
I feel like that was. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyways, historically, that feels right. At the very least, all Cavs finals runs in recent memory have included beating the Toronto Raptors, or at least, that's been part of the equation for some of them. So hopefully the trend continues. We will be back later this week to preview that series. Big thanks to everyone tuning in live on YouTube. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasedown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.